What if the closest thing to Zinedine Zidane isn't a retired legend, but a 20-year-old wearing the same white shirt in Madrid? A few weeks ago, Tony Cascarino, a former Marseille striker who actually faced Zidane and has publicly called him the greatest midfielder of all time, made a statement that stopped a lot of people in their tracks. He said Jude Bellingham is the first player who truly reminds him of Zidane. Not just slightly, not stylistically in one or two movements, but in presence, in aura, in the way he carries himself on a football pitch. And when you really look at it, the comparison doesn't feel forced. They're nearly the same height, similar frame. That long gliding stride that eats up ground without ever looking rushed. The calmness under pressure. Defenders swarm, yet somehow they never seem panicked, almost untouchable in tight spaces. There's an elegance to both of them that makes the game look slower than it actually is. But here's where it gets interesting. Zidane, for all his genius, was never explosive over distance. Acceleration wasn't his defining trait. Bellingham, on the other hand, adds that extra layer. He may not yet possess Zidane's full technical mastery, but he brings pace, verticality, and tactical flexibility that makes him dangerous in more areas of the pitch. He can glide past you or burst past you. And the irony? Cascarino mentioned that if Bellingham wants to reach Zidane's level, he'd need to improve his heading. Fast forward to his early days at Real Madrid. 4 goals scored, 2 of them headers. It's almost as if he's ticking off the checklist in real time. The parallels don't stop there. When Bellingham was asked about his idol growing up, he didn't hesitate. Zidane. When Zidane was asked about Bellingham, he described him as a version of himself. When it came time to choose a squad number in Madrid, the iconic number 5, Zidane's old number, was handed to Jude. A symbolic passing of responsibility. And when Bellingham scored his first goal for the club, fans instantly noticed something uncanny. The movement, the balance. Even the finish felt like a modern echo of a classic Zidane moment. Now imagine this. There are whispers that Zidane could one day return to coach Real Madrid. Picture that scenario. Zidane mentoring Bellingham. A master shaping the player many believe mirrors him. How much higher could Jude climb? And that's the frightening part. He's only 20. Already valued among the world's elite. Already delivering decisive goals in the biggest stadiums. Already carrying himself like someone who understands the weight of history. If he continues on this trajectory, he won't just be compared to legends. He could become the greatest British midfielder the game has ever seen. But here's what makes the story even more fascinating. As a child, Jude Bellingham didn't even care about football, which is strange considering his father, Mark Bellingham, was a non-league goal-scoring phenomenon, playing for around 20 clubs and reportedly scoring over 700 career goals. Football was everywhere in his household, yet young Jude wasn't obsessed. Not at first. In fact, he only started playing because his father needed extra players for a youth team he was setting up. And then something unexpected happened. The kid was a natural. Within a year, he was in Birmingham City's academy. Every season, the goals increased. The performances became impossible to ignore. By the age of 10, coaches were convinced he needed tougher competition and wanted to move him up to play with older boys. But Jude resisted. He didn't want to leave his friends. So the coaches came up with a compromise. Since both age groups played at the same time on weekends, Jude would split matches. One half with the older kids, one half with his own age group. It was meant to ease him into higher standards. Everything was working perfectly, until one weekend changed everything. He finished his half against the older players, then joined his age group for the second half, and scored 15 goals in one half. That wasn't development anymore, that was a warning sign to everyone else. The same kid who once didn't care about football was now rewriting expectations before he'd even hit his teenage years. And maybe that's what makes the Zidane comparison feel less like hype and more like destiny. Because sometimes greatness doesn't start with obsession, sometimes it starts by accident. After scoring 15 goals in a single half, even Jude couldn't argue anymore. The coaches were right. He had outgrown his level. And from that moment on, the pattern was clear. Every time he stepped up, he didn't just survive, he dominated. At 13, he was already playing for England's under-15s and captaining them. At 15, he was thrown into Birmingham's under-23 side, competing against players 8 years older. At 16, first-team coaches were watching him closely. Then Pep Clotet took charge at Birmingham, saw him in training, and made a decision almost instantly. He later admitted, "The moment I saw him, I knew he had to be in the first team." Have I ever seen a 16-year-old like him? Only once. The name he mentioned? Lionel Messi. And Clotet wasn't alone. That same year, 442 magazine listed Jude among the 50 most exciting teenagers in English football. He ranked 49th, but here's the detail that mattered. He was the youngest player on the entire list, and already Europe was watching. Soon after, he captained England at the Serenka Cup with the under-17s, scored in the final, lifted the trophy, and was named Player of the Tournament. By the time he returned to Birmingham, he wasn't just a promising academy kid anymore. He was inevitable. At 16 years and 38 days, he became Birmingham City's youngest ever debutant, breaking a 49-year-old record. But this wasn't some ceremonial appearance. No charity minutes, no marketing stunt. When his teammates, grown professionals, were asked about him, they didn't talk about potential. They said he was already the best player in training, that nobody could match him, that he was a cut above. Think about that. Established adults. Championship-level professionals? Saying a 16-year-old was the best among them. In his second match, despite a 3-0 loss, he was named man of the match. In his third, at home, coming off the bench with his team trailing, he sparked a comeback and scored the winner, becoming the youngest goal scorer in Birmingham's history. Another goal followed. By the end of the month, he was named the league's Young Player of the Month, and that's when the Giants came knocking. Manchester United went all in. A reported £20 million offer, a personal tour of Carrington, even club legend Eric Cantona involved in the pitch. The message was clear: you are the future. But Jude didn't move. Even when the pandemic disrupted the season, he kept delivering. When Birmingham were staring at relegation, he assisted a crucial late equalizer that kept them alive with 2 games to spare. He wasn't just talented, he was decisive. When the season ended, United returned with an even stronger offer. More money than anyone else, possibly double. Financial security guaranteed before his 18th birthday. He still said no. That was the moment many realized this wasn't just another wonder kid chasing contracts. This was someone thinking long-term, thinking development, thinking legacy. Instead, inspired by how Borussia Dortmund had developed Jadon Sancho, Bellingham chose Germany, £25 million, the most expensive 17-year-old in history at the time. And then came the controversy. Birmingham City retired his number 22 shirt. In English football, that almost never happens, especially not for a 17-year-old who played just 44 senior matches. Fans mocked the decision, called it tin pot, said it was embarrassing, but time has a funny way of changing perspectives. Looking back now, it feels less like exaggeration and more like foresight. Birmingham saw what the rest of the country would soon understand, that they had witnessed something historic at the very beginning. And Dortmund, they understood immediately. Thomas Delaney once described Jude and Erling Haaland as having a loose wire, a switch that flips when competition starts, an obsession with winning, a refusal to hide. On his Dortmund debut, just days after turning 17, Bellingham scored, becoming the youngest goal scorer in the club's history. 5 days later, he assisted against Borussia Mönchengladbach.
We still haven't seen his peak.
Soon after, he was named Bundesliga Rookie of the Month.
Every
new country,
gets bigger,
new league,
and somehow
new pressure,
he gets calmer.
same outcome.
From
Because by
Birmingham's
now, it was
prodigy to
obvious.
Dortmund's leader, from
Jude
England's
Bellingham
engine,
wasn't
Real
climbing the
Madrid's
ladder
game
step
changer.
by step.
Jude
He
Bellingham
was skipping
doesn't just
rungs.
handle pressure. He transforms because of it. They compared him to legends. Soon, legends might be compared to him.